We're sold a bill of goods when we get in the business, and that is that we own a real estate business, which while technically true, it's a real estate business that's 100% dependent on your own personal effort. And that's not really a business that you own, that's a business that owns you, because if you're not working, the business is out of business. So for me, I recognize those two sort of fundamental changes that I saw were needed. So what was broken was that wasn't really a business for independent contractors. I've said over the years that, it's the one industry that people don't retire from, they die, because they just, they don't have any sort of retirement nest egg. And it's a joke, but I don't think it's that much of a joke. There are people out there selling real estate using walkers.
Glenn, thank you so much for sitting down with me. This podcast is Pareja Unfiltered, where I just want to have super candid conversations with leaders and entrepreneurs who've disrupted industries, started a journey. And I like to capture the early parts of the journey, because I think so many of us get on stage, you see a LinkedIn profile, social media, edited, polished version. So thank you. And the lines of questions are going to be very authentic. So thank you for joining me. And let's kick it off with, at what moment did you think that the traditional real estate industry or model had to be disrupted and, it was flawed or obsolete?
Yeah, well, I recognize opportunity right away. And I'd come out of really internet marketing. I was doing internet marketing pre-web. So we're talking back on AOL, Prodigy, built an online service. I was doing a lot of lead gen once the web showed up. And so when I got in the industry, I saw the web as the natural place to do lead gen in 2002. Actually, even before that, but I was a little bit early. So I came back in 2002. And what I recognized is that the models for real estate were fundamentally not set up for people building like massive lead gen systems. It was really individual broker, individual agent, or running a brokerage. And those are really the two options in 2002. There were some people who had built some teams, but they hadn't been industrialized at all. And so for me, as a business owner in the lead gen business monetized through real estate, I recognized that it needed a different sort of structure to flex on. The other piece that I recognized early on was that, and I've said this on stage a bunch of times, which is that we're sold a bill of goods when we get in the business, and that is that we own a real estate business, which while technically true, it's a real estate business that's 100% dependent on your own personal efforts. And that's not really a business that you own, that's a business that owns you, because if you're not working, the business is out of business. So for me, I recognize those two sort of fundamental changes that I saw were needed. So what was broken was that wasn't really a business for independent contractors. I've said over the years that, it's the one industry that people don't retire from, they die, because they just, they don't have any sort of retirement nest egg. And it's a joke, but I don't think it's that much of a joke. There are people out there selling real estate using walkers, so, and for me, that's not a very dignified way to be in a very honorable industry of going out and helping people with these big purchases. And the real estate agent at the end of the day, fundamentally is the one that in the downturn, tons of bankruptcies from individual agents. They're typically not great at quote unquote business. And so what I saw was really just an opportunity to restructure it in a way to help agents with systems that they may not be fundamentally set up to put in themselves. So that's kind of what was the thing. And then of course, that ultimately led to 2009, after the downturn in the housing industry, to actually launching eXp. And again, I was early on internet marketer, really before internet marketing was a thing. I was big on internet lead gen before internet lead gen was a thing. So I've always kind of future paced myself in terms of seeing where the future is. And to quote Wayne Gretzky, I do fundamentally like to go where the puck is going, rather than hanging out where the puck is. And so that for me is like the magnetic draw is the idea that in 2009 we had high-speed internet everywhere. I'd been at Keller. I'd also been in a number of network marketing companies over the years, and I noticed that the financial model can actually change how people show up. Like people, like you think about the culture at eXp, I imagined that if we built a really robust program and people bought into it, which was a total unknown, that it would create a different type of culture as well. So really looking at the future of what business is going to look like. And I don't think it was that big of a leap for most people to think that in 10, 15, 20 years, you wouldn't need to go to an office to sell real estate. Just nobody was willing to make the leap that early. And we did. And as a result, we were able to, we're obviously the largest independent real estate brokerage in the world.
So you built a cloud-based brokerage before virtual work was cool. What was the catalyst for that thought process?
So I use the phrase is necessity is the mother of invention. I couldn't afford offices, and I was determined after watching the dot-com collapse in 2000, which ate my lunch along with a lot of other people, and then the housing crisis in 2008. I was determined to build a recession-proof business. And what I recognized the single biggest cost to run a real estate brokerage was the physical bricks and mortar costs. And I said, we've got to build something that's defensible, that's not dependent on bricks and mortar. That was really the thing in 2009, from mid-February till about July, we focused on what does that model need to look like, because my business constraints were, we're not getting our offices back, and we got to be recession-proof. And those were the two business constraints that I wanted to build into the new model. And then we said, okay, if those are our two constraints, what do we need to do inside of those constraints to build a new model? And so, virtual was natural, but you have no bricks and mortar, you're automatically cloud-based and virtual. And then it actually was fairly simple, because business constraints are actually some of the most powerful tools you can have in business, because once you know your constraints, you still have an infinite number of ways to organize inside those constraints. And so we just went to work figuring out how to do it.
It's fascinating, because I think there's a pretty, ubiquitous concept in the world where people say overnight success, and people normally respond with it's a 10-year overnight success. Mm-hmm. And that normally, that also tracks to, outliers and 10,000 hours of mastery. So 10 years is a super important timeline in business. And I think it maps perfectly to your journey. The first 10 years of EXP are the ones that most people wouldn't have wanted to be on with you. Tell me about those early days, from driving around in the RV with Debbie and convincing states to change the rules. And jump in there, because I have some follow-up questions, but I want to hear that beginning part of the story.
So I'm an entrepreneur, which basically means I have a disease. It means that I am unemployable, and I'd rather be a broke entrepreneur than to actually get a paycheck. So for me, it wasn't hard at all, because for me, I like doing new things. I'm like, hey, I've got a finite number of years on planet Earth, and I want to do cool stuff. And if it's not cool, then I don't want to do it. That's kind of my sort of litmus test. So for me, it wasn't really that tough. It was like I could see where things were going. And I had, even from a young age, like 12, 13 years old or even younger, I had seen various business ideas that I'd read about something. I go, that's a really good idea. And 6 to 12 months later, there would be a business around it. And so I saw this repeat throughout multiple places in my life. And I'm like, okay, I recognize a good idea, and eventually I've got to go execute against some of these ideas, because I know they're going to happen with or without me. So why not be, part of the with me kind of thing. So for me, it was like, I knew where things were going. So it really wasn't that tough to go out and execute against it. Whether we were successful or not was a totally different animal, because I got tons of, stories of failures along the way. But they were all failures in doing something fun and interesting and cool in my eyes. And so they're all just learning experiences. So those early years were were a lot of experimental type of things. First one was, hey, can we build a business where everybody goes home? And my motivational speech you might have heard, which is, everybody's going home. This is either going to work or it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, we're all looking for work. That was my motivational speech, and it was very pragmatic. There was a lot of emotion attached to it. It's like, hey, we got to burn the bridges and we got to make this work. But that ended up being a pretty powerful metaphor. But in like the RV was another one where I think it was 2015, our lease was coming up. And I go, well, why do we need to get a house? What if we could run this business from an RV? And it was really kind of another science experiment. So we had no house to go back to for 10 months. The RV was, but for me, it was to show people that are saying, well, I need an office. Why do we have a house? And I can run this business. And so it was kind of a way to demonstrate the sort of the fact that you don't really need as much as you think you need to do the business that you're doing. And it was, again, we did 25,000 miles. And then at the end of it, I was like, I'm done. I literally didn't want to look at another motor coach until COVID, because it was so, and that was, and the RV then was a survival piece because you couldn't see people. So I'd like get in the RV, and that only lasted for like 8 months, but I'm not an RV guy anymore.
Was there a moment in those early years where you questioned the model, or worse, thought about pulling the plug and saying, what the hell am I doing?
The interesting is there really wasn't. And part of it is because every single month, we had more agents on the platform. We were doing more business than we were doing the month before. We could have pivoted back to so prior to EXP, I had 6 of the top real estate websites in the country. If I had been a portal, I probably would have been the number 4 portal in the country at the time, scaling teams on all of this stuff. So I was really good at SEO, really good at internet lead gen. And we basically abandoned all that stuff, like all those number 1 websites, which actually I wish we had back now because it would be good for Revenos or whatever. But but for us, it was, we kept on seeing more agents joining the platform. We were getting great quality people in those early days. Now, a lot of them were nowhere near the caliber that we're getting today, but it validated what we were doing. And so there was actually never a point in time after we launched in 2009 that I ever thought that we were going to need to entirely change the model or make a major pivot. In fact, we've got basically the same model. Now we went revenue share 1.0, 2019, 1.5, and then this last year we moved to revenue share 2.0. But for the most part, the model's still the model.
So this question, I think, is the one a lot of entrepreneurs ponder because as a founder, you go from an army of one wearing all the hats. Mm-hmm. I think in this last version of your leadership, you've moved from just being the founder to more the chairman. What parts of your leadership have you had to unlearn?
I'm still unlearning them. I still want to be highly involved in different parts of the business, and it may be fundamentally the founder's dilemma, which I've read a lot of companies that until people actually sell their baby, they don't have a way to disconnect their identity from the business that they're building. And so the part is when you've got good leaders like yourself, like literally get out of the way. And hopefully the last year I've got out of the way because, but that's probably been the toughest part over the years. And I was even thinking about it even this morning, like in some respects, the reason why I didn't get out of the way is because we hadn't found the right leader yet. Even though I was being sort of coached, get out of the way. But, when you've got a good leader and it's a good leader, it's easy to get out of the way.
You said eXp is not just a brokerage, it's a platform. In your mind, what's the end game to the platform you're building?
So, I've always played with this idea that real estate is to EXP as books were to Amazon. Um, and, but the first thing is obviously we've got to continue to master the book game or the real estate game, which we're doing. We've got the international expansion going on, which is phenomenal. And we're starting to take this thing sort of global and worldwide. But at some point we get to scale where it's going to grow incrementally as opposed to exponentially. So the early years, exponential growth. We're seeing that on international. We're seeing, exponential growth now really start to kick in and that curve kick in. But at some point when you get to scale, in general, businesses start to kick off cash, which creates this next wave of what do you do? It's not the purpose of a business isn't just to make money, even though that is a purpose. It's not the primary purpose. Primary purpose, I think, is to become an engine of value, or value creation over time. And so thinking about, what other places can we, with our really talented team and innovations that we brought into the real estate industry, are there other places we can apply this learning, or are there other verticals that we could play a role in? I think about real estate agents as being one set of independent contractors that didn't have a safety net until eXp showed up. I think there's a number of other industries where that generally is still the same thing. Mortgage brokers, insurance agents, and other consulting based industries are very akin, not as organized as real estate, but akin to it, in that there's not a lot of structure for the independent contractor to go out there and build something and not have to put in the infrastructure around them. If they can, that's great. They typically start a small business that might become a large business. But if you can build it as a platform, then it totally changes an industry. And so is there another industry at some point in the future that we could fundamentally change by bringing some of this philosophy and platform thinking to? And I think it is certainly a possibility, and hopefully we get there.
You're probably the only company that I've seen go public in the last 10, 15 years without massive amounts of venture capital. And you've done it without raising debt either. What do you think the other companies didn't understand about sustainability and scale that you've managed to do and be the outlier in the public group?
So one of the books both you and I read was the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, and I probably was wired this way a little bit even before I read the book, but I really bought into the concept that Gary talked about, which was lead with revenue, which is that if you can't pay for it with the revenue that you're generating, don't do it. Like actually run it like steward it like a real business. And I think there's a lot of companies that approached it differently. Now I think the investors got a great deal at a lot of these companies in being able to buy debt and equity and other things, and these are pretty sophisticated investors. They know how their models work. But I think if you were to be more strategic with the way you approach capital, you would create outsized returns for the shareholders you do have. A lot of times it's the individual entrepreneur. Then when you end up in a company, one of our competitors, the founder of the company owns less than 7% of the company. Like you think about how much dilution was created in that, and if those early shareholders were, for all intents and purposes, damaged by early dilution and early, whatever those other vehicles for fundings were, convertible debt, et cetera. Whereas if you would have just run it from cash flow, personally, you would be better off. You'd have more control. You'd be less, you wouldn't have to answer to Wall Street because they didn't give you money fundamentally to begin with. And so it allows you to stay closer to your mission without getting distracted by, well, I put 25 million in a company. You better do this, which will totally distract that group of folks. And eventually they will say, well, you need to act in shareholders' best interest, and the shareholders that they're talking about is the one that gave you 25 million. We took no money. Like, we don't have anybody breathing on our neck saying, we gave you X amount of dollars, we want you to do this, which gives us so much more freedom and flexibility than the folks that, raise money from Goldman or whoever it is that's out there. We don't have any of that breathing down our neck, which is why I think we've been able and still can say with significant credibility that we are the most agent-centric real estate brokerage on the planet, because we do not answer to an investor that put a bunch of money in.
What do you believe is the future of real estate with all the shifts in technology going on? And you've been really good at being 3 years, 5 years ahead of everybody. And I know the amount of thought process that you and I are doing to future-proof the business. But, if for the people watching this, where do you see the world in 3 to 5 years?
Well, we're in the middle of the biggest fundamental shift we've ever seen. And it's happening so fast. So I've been through a few shifts. I went from really the early days of personal computers to pre-web marketing, to the web, to SEO, to now where we're at is in this new AI era. And each of those cycles is faster and faster. And AI is like taking those cycles, and you almost throw what you thought were cycles that were dividing in half every period. It's now divided by a quarter. So what we saw, so we're seeing this huge acceleration in AI. And in all likelihood, there will be a lot of pain that comes from it. Because a lot of stuff that people do is getting picked up by different AI tools and technologies. And so it means that if I was launching eXp today, I might not even bring in anybody else in the short run, because now you can build the software stack, you can put in the management layer, you can put in a lot of things with AI. And if you can't do it today, in 3 months, you will be able to. And so businesses can get super, super streamlined internally. For real estate agents, it's a marketing heyday right now for those who are really leaning into AI. They can build more relevant one-to-one content. Before, it was one-to-many content. It was one-to-many marketing, social media, et cetera. And one-to-many is still an important component. But once you get somebody in your ecosystem, like the ability to use AI for one-to-one marketing and to do that at scale is like crazy what you can do. So now you can have intimate relationships from the consumer's perspective with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And you're able to scale your influence in a way where it just couldn't do it before. So all the things that are happening right now, it's hard to even imagine what it looks like 3 to 5 years from now. I think it's going to be radically different 1 year from now.
So if you couldn't work in real estate because some rule changed or you were barred from the industry, what industry would you go disrupt next?
Oh, what a great question. So I've got about a dozen different businesses in a box. I'll tell you this one. Going, eXp and myself, there's legal stuff going all the time. So recently I had to go through a deposition, and it was, and I went through what was called deposition prep, which was a total waste of time. I didn't get, there was no prep at all. So I went and played with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gave me better prep. And so over the weekend, I built an entire company around using AI for deposition prep. Nobody does it. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I've got a product sitting in a box. I even did the incorporation, built the website, built the initial model, did it all over a weekend. I haven't touched it since then. But like I've got like, that's one of about 5 or 6 businesses in a box that I go have fun with and see what happens. And I think the idea of being able to sort of spin up an idea and like go and like do it is going to be so easy to see which ones work, which ones don't. And if they work, great. If they don't, no big deal. But I don't know that I would be going to disrupt an industry so much as to do some really fun projects that, if they take off, could have significant upside, but it'd probably be more short burst projects versus something that, is a 10 to 15 year journey.
And with this ubiquitous access, what do you think happens to the playing field? Because if you have that ability, one of the belief systems I hold is we're all radically average in large numbers. Mm-hmm. How do you think that adjusts the entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Well, I think the consumer ecosystem is they've got to have so much more choice of things that they can play with. Like it's literally going to be it has been the attention economy. Like how do you get the attention of people? Because I think that's really what it comes down to is you're still got to figure out how do you break through the noise, because there's going to be a ton more noise because anybody with a laptop can build software over a weekend and have it sort of out there ready for somebody to buy. And what we have seen is that people have over a weekend built software, and within a few months they're making 50, 100,000, 200,000 a month from these little software projects. And there's a bunch of these sort of things that are out there. And so I think it's going to be about identifying a niche quickly, executing and get that niche quickly, and recognizing that niche will get crowded really fast.
I say often marketers ruin everything. And, that sometimes people laugh and think I'm being disrespectful, but the goal, I think, of enterprise is to find an outsized return to effort, mm-hmm. right? Whether it's email, then social ads, and now probably prompt ads to LLMs. So I like that concept. Today, how do you define or recognize the feeling of success being at eXp versus in the early days?
Yeah. So, I have to look at, I think you're the same age I was when I started eXp. I think 42.
Mm-hmm.
42. So I started eXp when I was 42. And, it's interesting going, like I'm 58 now, and it's interesting going from that point in time when you've got your kids and you got all that stuff going on, and you got this business and it's exciting, and then you're doing all the trade-offs. And now I'm, I don't have the trade-offs anymore. My kids are, they're 30s now and they're kind of doing their thing. I actually think of this more like a really intense hobby. Like for me, it's about, showing up every day, working on something, being very intentional about it, but it doesn't feel like work. Like because there's less trade-offs than there was back then. And not to say it didn't feel like if there was definitely work and there were trade-offs, but now it's work with more of the satisfaction that goes with the work. And so I just kind of see that as being like I kind of feel like this next stage is more about, mentoring the next generation of leaders coming up, and helping them sort of understand some of the trade-offs that they're needing to work on, in their life, while staying intentional on their longer term goals. And for me, that brings me a lot of satisfaction, and that really, I think success is fundamentally in your mind. Like you're either like success is not. We might judge people be successful, but you can be successful and not look successful in your own mind. I actually went through a little epiphany years ago, which is that Somebody without a lot of money that's proud of what they've done is more successful than the person with a lot of money that's always pissed off at themselves because they're not achieving. And so it's like, so in my mind, like that's more successful. They're more satisfied. They've got a better balance. They've got whatever. And so I think that's the piece that when I think success, I really think about being good with what's going on. And when you're there, you're kind of centered, you're kind of zen. And I think that, for all intents and purposes, is really the definition of success, because everything else is just external trappings. It's what's going on inside that ultimately defines success.
And so for the last question, Glenn, when you are not in the room, what do you want the agents who benefited most from EXP say behind your back?
I'm sure glad you started that company. That'd be one. I in terms of, I think just selfishly, just that he built something that has changed my life and changed other people's lives. I mean, that's selfishly what I would like them to say. Interestingly, I don't care. I did it for me, even though it was for them, because I wanted to see if I could build the company that would provide the benefits, but I wasn't doing it fundamentally for what they would say about me after the fact. It was more about whether we could actually do it and if I could stay in integrity with myself along the way.
Well, I'll capture that in a moment for you. I just did an event in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, sold out room, 400 people. And a young man who's part of our company was on stage, and he was telling the room, the goal of entrepreneurship is to have a dream big enough that other people join you in it. And he said to the whole room, like, we are sitting in Glenn's dream. So I think that perfectly captures what you said. Thank you so much for the time today and starting the company that we now get to live in your dream with.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.